what his son and himself are facing with respect to what is being published and what we all know through our various channels. So they can continue business as usual because this critical information is not available to the Prime Minister. And we are saying that if that is the position of the Minister in relating to the Prime Minister, that alone is grounds for the Prime Minister to ask him to leave the cabinet, and if he doesn't leave, then you fire him. And if that is not happening, then the people of Trinidad and Tobago must know that what we have is not a government with a Prime Minister who is free to act to protect the public interest, but a Prime Minister who is afraid to act, because we all know that the threat is that if the Prime Minister acts against the Minister of National Security, the Minister of National Security is threatening to act against the Prime Minister. That is called blackmail. Is that how the business of Trinidad and Tobago is being run or is to be run? We don't know. But the information available to us indicate that the public interest of Trinidad and Tobago does not take pride of place. And of course, it's the media's fault. Because in the same article, the AG is saying the media has gotten it wrong in the past. And we have to be careful that we subscribe to the principle of do unto others as you have them do unto you. This is not the media's problem. The media is only reporting. What he's trying to say is that the only information they have and can have is what has been published by the media. We are saying no. The Prime Minister is in a position to be better informed than the media. And we are demanding that she use her position as Prime Minister in relation to the Minister of National Security who sits next to her, and properly inform herself and inform the country what she has determined and how she intends to proceed. To come and blame the media, foreign or local, for being fallible is to try to obfuscate and not act as the circumstance requires. And then they tell us, if every time there's an allegation published, you act without seeking verification. What's the government saying? This is not an every time situation. This is a serious matter, which must be attended to as priority number one in Trinidad and Tobago today. It is the issue in front of us. It is not every time. And then the Attorney General, as all the ministers do whenever they are confronted with governmental problems, they seek to try to praise the Prime Minister for whatever she does, to make it look as if the Prime Minister is acting better than previous Prime Ministers. And not only should we be critical of her, but we should accept that she's doing better. And here are the examples. This is the Prime Minister who, according to the Attorney General, we have the example of Mary King. We have the example of Herbert Bolney. We have the example of Clarice Baptiste Cornelis. We have the example of Colin Parter. No other government has done this. So the Prime Minister has established, and then in the past, the Prime Minister has established a track record, unlike previous Prime Ministers, in dealing with ministers. Now I want to take issue with that, because this is the country's Attorney General trying to direct the public to actions of the Prime Minister prior to this situation, which demonstrate that the Prime Minister acts appropriately when issues come before her. He's giving us 4 examples. Example number 1. Mary King, as an example of the Prime Minister acting decisively and properly. Let me remind you what the Mary King issue was. Mary King issue was that she had taken part in an evaluation where she had, I think her husband's business was involved, and she got involved in the evaluation. When that was brought to the Prime Minister's attention, the Prime Minister did not fire Mary King. The Prime Minister acted by reporting to the Attorney General, who reported to the Prime Minister that he found nothing wrong with it. There was a second instance of that, where the Attorney General took a second look at it same Attorney General who's quoting this as an example of prime ministerial stellar performance, the same Attorney General took a second look at it and reported that there was nothing wrong. It was only when the Express published the full story, and it was glaringly embarrassing for the government that this minister had got herself in this situation, that the Prime Minister fired Mary King. To Mary King's shock, she was fired because Mary King told us that the Prime Minister was fully apprised of all the facts, and the Prime Minister had told her everything was okay, so she never expected to be fired. That's the Mary King example. Then there's the Vonley example that he quotes. And you must understand, Vonley was fired for lying to the cabinet as an explanation for the history of Clause 34. Of course, Mr. Vonley has resolutely denied ever lying to the cabinet. He stated, and we accept, that he was made a scapegoat to the population as a palliative, where the Prime Minister will not explain what happened with the creation of Section 34 and why it was executed in that way. So that was no instance to be quoted as for Prime Minister to take any credit in. That matter is still ongoing, I show you. And then he talks about Therese Baptiste Cornelis. And that's not true. She was never fired. So it cannot be quoted as an example of the Prime Minister acting in any way. The facts are that Therese Baptiste Cornelis was recalled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She chose not to respond to the recall. She resigned the job and went away with her husband to another country. She was never fired. And then Colin Parta, which is the worst example he could quote. Because everything I said to you about the Jack Warner situation talks about innocence, talks about investigation, talk about establishing the facts. Colin Parta was fired, according to the information we got from the government, after he was supposed to have not cooperated with the police in a matter involving tests for intoxication. He was fired even before the tests were probably confirmed. He was fired on comments made by the Minister of National Security, who told the public he reported to the Prime Minister. Parta spoke to the Prime Minister. Parta's matter is before the court, where he is contesting his innocence or guilt. So that cannot be an example of the same standards that are applying now, where here's a minister fired summarily, even as he is protesting his innocence. Even as the Commissioner of Police took weeks to investigate and determine if he should be charged. He was fired probably within hours. Is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago is being run in a very worrisome way. The Prime Minister is not free to act to protect the cabinet, the government, and the country. The Prime Minister is afraid to touch the Minister of National Security, not only in this matter, but in other situations. And they set out, whenever they're exposed, to create all kinds of explanations as to why they cannot act. And this being so, the very fact that the government could be very glibly reporting to us that they have not been in receipt of any information from the US authorities to clarify for the cabinet or for the Prime Minister whether or not a minister of government is the subject of this US investigation should tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago how far we have fallen in our relationship with the United States government. And we have no doubt that if what the government is saying is in fact true, that the US government is snubbing the government of Trinidad and Tobago in their request, as the Attorney General has said, they have exhausted the diplomatic channels. And they have not been able to find anything out. Because to tell you that somebody is the subject of an investigation in no way prejudices the court proceedings of that investigation if it proceeds to the court. So the Prime Minister is being less than forthrightness when she talks about being prejudicial in getting certain information. But again, you must remember it's the same Prime Minister who told us that she can't tell us certain matters because it's sub judice on matters which were not even before the court. And again, that involved the Minister of National Security. When he acted with the soldiers in Debe, the Prime Minister chose not to treat the matter frontally by saying that the matter is sub judice because the people are threatening them. If the public interest is to be protected, it is important that the government of Trinidad and Tobago not be confirmed to be a government that is acting with criminal intent to protect criminal actors in whatever form it might take place. The oath of office requires that office holders like the Prime Minister act without fear or favor and to do all things to protect the interests of every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Against that background, it cannot be said that the current arrangement with the Minister of National Security is not hurting the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Whatever the government is waiting on or looking for, whatever milestone they hope to reach, we don't know. But what is available to the international community today, where every time Jack Warner's name is mentioned, in these matters, unsavory as they are, it is mentioned in the context of his presence as Minister of National Security of Trinidad and Tobago. And that hurts. And on that basis alone, the Prime Minister has a duty to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago, protect the good name of this country, protect our best interests by removing Jack Warner from the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. If he does not tell her, and if she cannot report to us that he has told her categorically that he is nowhere involved in any of these matters and is not the subject of any of these investigations, if that cannot be confirmed within the minute, then the Prime Minister must do what has to be done, which in the face of what else is available, that Mr. Warner is not to be allowed to be National Security Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Because I would be very surprised indeed if, while this condition remains, that the US government will share its sensitive data with a country whose National Security Minister may very well be the prime suspect of its investigation at home. This is the conundrum in which we have found ourselves. And the Prime Minister and the Attorney General embarking on the escapade that they are embarking upon now is purely an obfuscation to prevent the Prime Minister from being seen to not be acting in a situation where she is required to act in protection of the public interest. She has put Mr. Warner, for the first time, above the public interest. And when one adds this to what's happened in other matters, and by other matters here I'm talking about the recent national blackout that we had, where we are not satisfied that we have been properly advised as to what took place in this country, what systems failed, who failed, and why the failures took place. What we do know is that our image as a country with a stable infrastructure for the supply of power is being called into question. And with millions of dollars being lost, we get the impression that it's being treated like all in a day's work in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are unimpressed with explanations given by officials of state who who seem to think that self-praise is a substitute for clear knowledge of information. We in the opposition, we are very concerned about the Prime Minister's publishing of a photograph of herself in front of a clock that showed her in a power station at 9:21 on Thursday night, when it was only after midnight that the country experienced and knew that there was a nationwide power failure. And we expect that there will be further explanations of that. Because the power failure was known to the country, to the large part of the country, after midnight, which was into Friday morning. And our understanding is that that 9:21 on the clock, with the Prime Minister in the picture, needs a believable explanation. And we wait for it.
What sort of implication do you think we can expect in light of the situation from the United States government? What are they likely to do?
What we expect to happen? What we expect to happen is that we don't know what the truth is. As we speak to you now, we don't know what the truth is. Because the Attorney General has already told us that this government has exhausted its efforts through those channels, and therefore they can do nothing. The Prime Minister has told us she's now asking for those channels to be opened. What is the truth? We are not dealing here with clear and truthful statements. And that is why the government is seen to be what it is, a font from which information cannot be taken at face value. Until we know the truth, we don't know what to expect. And we don't expect that the Prime Minister would rely on anybody other than the Minister as the first port of call to tell her the truth. The Prime Minister must be able to tell us that the Minister has told her that he is not involved in any way in this investigation. Because unless she can tell us that, we have to go by the public information that he is involved. And if he is involved as a person of interest, well then he should not be in our cabinet. And what the Prime Minister and the Attorney General set out to do now by these recent statements is to wait on a piece of information or a letter that may never come. That is their protection and preservation of the Warner situation. And we are saying that is unacceptable. Enough is available in the international arena, not for the first time, not for the second time, not for the third time. Enough is available for the Prime Minister to say that this is unacceptable and we must change it. Instead of getting that, we are getting further instances of the Prime Minister taking positions which could only have the effect of protecting Mr. Warner's position. And while what is happening, Mr. Warner himself is being very obnoxious when questions are put to him by the media of this country.
Dr. Rowley, is it?
Huge numbers of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who depend on perfect friendly relations with the United States for their livelihood, and any deterioration in our relationship with the United States is a matter of serious concern for all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And it will be a new development in our relationship with the United States if a government cannot determine from the United States whether or not a member of the cabinet is the subject of a criminal investigation.
Dr. Rowley, isn't the Prime Minister seeking clarification from Mr. Warner, a question of the quote spoiler, himself to himself?
No, sir. We operate the management of this country under the Westminster system. And in that system, there's cabinet government. And one of the requirements for effective functioning of Westminster Cabinet governance is that members of the Cabinet are required to be forthright and truthful with their colleagues. It's a requirement. So any member of the Cabinet who has any issue which may or may not impact on the wholesomeness of the Cabinet, such a member is required to be forthright and truthful with his colleagues. And colleague number one, primus inter pares, is the Prime Minister. And what we are facing as a country now is whether in fact that is taking place in this current Cabinet. Because we always assumed that it was taking place. We always assumed that our Prime Minister, whoever he or she might have been, is in a position to obtain truthful information from the person that she appointed to the Cabinet, or he appointed to the Cabinet, or that Cabinet ministers, whoever they are, once an issue arises, that those persons would be truthful and forthright with their colleagues in the Cabinet. Because you must remember, the Cabinet is an agency in this country, which is a superior agency of management of all our resources, operates largely through secret operation behind closed doors, where the members are joint and severally bound for their actions. The question that is coming up over the horizon to the people of Trinidad and Tobago today is whether there is a cabinet in Trinidad and Tobago that is operating according to these standards. And so far, what is worrisome is that it appears as though this is not so. Because the Prime Minister is not acting as a Prime Minister who is free to act without fear or favor. And secondly, in this particular matter, where we are now seeking to raise the Titanic to sail to a foreign port to get a letter before the Prime Minister for treat with this, when what she needs to do is to invoke the standards required of Westminster Cabinet government and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. No minister of any government in this country should be allowed to take the position that Jack Warner is taking. And I'm not talking to you. I have nothing to say to you. And unless you find out from somebody else, I will sit here until I choose to go. That is not a position of a member of a cabinet. As long as there is disquiet in the public domain, any member of the cabinet is required to humble him or herself and provide the information to bring comfort to the citizens. The opposite is happening here. And our protection in that scenario is the office of Prime Minister, who seems to think that we don't understand our protection, and as long as she tells us about going to the Attorney General for some never-ending investigation, that we can do nothing. The opposition is saying that this is ridiculous, it is preposterous, and it is dangerous.
Dr. Earl, you said the Prime Minister is afraid of Mr. Warner and that he enjoys all these liberties. Why do you think that's so?
It's not liberties, protection.
Well, protection.
Why is it so?
Yeah.
Well, you have to ask Mr. Warner that. And the Prime Minister. Ask Mr. Warner why it is that he could feel so confident that he could speak like that before a Prime Minister and before a country. I ain't going no way. When the whole world knows that this situation calls for him to go. Why is he so confident that he can speak like that? And then ask the Prime Minister, why is he so confident that she can't act?
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people have been calling for him to resign, him to step down over the years, been calling for the Prime Minister to remove him. I mean, nothing is being done. So the question now is, what if he doesn't? What if she doesn't?
Well, then we, the people of Trinidad, if he doesn't remove himself and she doesn't move him, then we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago as a nation, will continue to be humiliated and to have our public and international image damaged by the behavior of these two people. That's all. You think it is good for Trinidad and Tobago, who is dependent on foreign investment, to continue to run our economy and enjoy the life that we are living now, to have investors look at our country and see a situation where a Minister of National Security is facing down the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister is trying to face down the country where there are serious allegations of conduct which we have international consideration, and the government just seems to be helpless. I mean, I know there are a few persons who are supporting it and saying that is nothing wrong and political support and so on, but they are not the ones who we have to depend on to establish our circumstances. Doesn't matter how wrong the thing is, you'll find people supporting it everywhere in the world. What we have to ask ourselves here, is the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago functioning to the standard expected by the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Is the cabinet acting without duress? Is the prime minister acting without duress? And is Mr. Warner above the law? These are the questions we have to ask. Because as long as they stay doing that, it is damaging to the people of Trinidad and Tobago in many ways, and the details of which will unfold as we go along. What we are asking for us is to have this stop so that our business can be properly protected and that the people's interests will not be harmed further. We had that when we had the whole new God, Patrick Manning called the hard situation. Listen to the position of Kamala Prasad. This is actually, this is Jack Warner's position. Warner, PM should resign. In a statement issued yesterday, the 5th of April 2010, the Chaguanas MP said, if Manning was serious about developed nation status, he should follow the examples of the leaders like former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who resigned from office after being confronted with his party's sagging fortunes and public anger over Britain's engagement in the war in Iraq. So, he's pointing out that public anger had caused Tony Blair to resign. And he was calling on Patrick Manning to resign because there was public anger over Calder Hart. He called on Manning to rise to develop country governance standards and resign over public anger. Warner took issue with Manning's continued defense of former Udicott boss Calder Hart, although he was aware of Hart being the subject of possible criminal investigation as it related to his chairmanship of Udicott. So here it is in 2010, 1 month before they took charge of this country's affairs. Possible criminal investigation of Calder Hart was grounds for them calling for the resignation of the Prime Minister Patrick Manning. I want you to compare that to what they're saying and what they're doing now. Not possible. They've gone past possible investigation of a minister of government in the current situation, because the information that we have is that there is an investigation taking place where the minister of government may be a subject of interest. We are not even calling for the Prime Minister to resign. We are calling on her to move the minister. But they have set a higher standard before, where public anger and possible criminal investigation, not of a minister, you know, of a chairman of a state enterprise. On the 6th of April 2010, public anger and possible criminal investigation of a chairman was grounds for the Prime Minister to resign, according to the current Minister of National Security. And of course, by the end of April, April 30th, he was maintaining that call. And I'm quoting here again from newspapers of April 30th. Chaguanas MP, Jack Warner, is calling for the immediate removal of Calder Hart. And of course, the resignation of the Prime Minister. So this should tell us that the standards have changed, the yardsticks have changed, and the very people who set and demanded those standards in 2010 are now setting new standards in protection of their colleague in the cabinet at this point in time. Thank you.